Imagine living in one of the most powerful civilizations in history. An empire that, at its peak, stretched from the coasts of Spain to the banks of the Euphrates, covering the entire Mediterranean and beyond. Now imagine that all of that structure of power, culture, and legacy, crumbles. The great Rome, the center of the world, fades into the shadows. But what really caused the fall of this giant? Today, we will unveil the key factors that led to the fall of the Roman Empire and how its consequences continue to resonate in our modern society. We will not only talk about invading armies, but about internal corruption, economic collapse, and the social impact that forever transformed the course of history. Are you ready to discover how one of the greatest civilizations of all time disappeared? Stay with us, because the best is yet to come. By the end, you will understand how this collapse affected not only Europe but the entire world as we know it today. At its peak, the Roman Empire not only dominated vast territories but also defined the very life of millions of people. From the great cities to the most remote corners of its empire, Rome imposed its power with unstoppable force. Through its legions, the empire expanded its influence, turning distant peoples into subjects of the eternal city. But beyond war and conquests, Rome left a tangible legacy in all aspects of life: law, architecture, language, and even the everyday customs of the conquered peoples. For someone living in the provinces, even if they never had the chance to set foot in Rome, life would be marked by Roman presence. From the taxes that had to be paid to the troops patrolling the borders, Rome was everywhere. Although Rome was thousands of miles away, its power was felt in every corner of the empire. But how did it come to this point? What allowed a small city on the Italian peninsula to become the center of an empire that spanned 3 continents? To understand how Rome fell, we must first look at one of the pillars that kept it standing: its economy. For centuries, the Roman Empire thrived thanks to one of the most powerful economies in history. However, this prosperity also hid the cracks that would eventually lead to its collapse. At its peak, Rome depended heavily on slave labor. It is estimated that around 25% of the Roman population were slaves, obtained from conquered nations. These slaves worked not only in the homes and lands of the Romans but also in mines, factories, and public works, helping to maintain the economic flow. But when conquests began to dwindle, so did the supply of slaves. This marked the beginning of the crisis. With no new lands to conquer and no new resources to exploit, Rome found itself with a serious problem: its economy, which had depended on expansion, began to crumble. The lack of technological innovations to replace slave labor left the economy trapped in an outdated system. Large cities began to suffer from resource shortages, and trade between provinces was severely affected. As the economy collapsed, the Roman Empire also struggled with an even more dangerous internal disease: corruption. Rome, which in its early stages was ruled by strong and visionary leaders, began to fall into the hands of corrupt emperors and politicians indifferent to the well-being of the people. This corruption undermined the structure of the empire, from the highest levels of government to the military institutions. But it wasn't just internal corruption that weakened Rome; military decisions also played a part. As the empire grew, Roman soldiers became scarce. To fill the ranks of its army, Rome turned to barbarian mercenaries, warriors from different Germanic tribes, who were hired to protect the empire's borders. However, these mercenaries did not share the same loyalty to Rome as the ancient legionaries. Over time, many of these mercenaries began to gain increasing power within the empire itself. Some even occupied significant military positions and began to influence crucial political decisions. Their loyalty was more to their tribes or to themselves than to Rome, which further destabilized the central government, weakening its ability to resist external threats. Finally, on September 4, 476 AD, the last Roman emperor of the West, Romulus Augustulus, was deposed by the German king Odoacer. This event marked the official end of the Western Roman Empire, the last vestige of an empire that was once the heart of the ancient world. The fall of Rome was not an isolated or sudden event, but rather the result of centuries of decay and internal struggle. Over the years, the empire's borders became increasingly vulnerable, and invasions by barbarian tribes such as the Visigoths, Vandals, and Huns ravaged entire regions. Despite the efforts of some emperors to regain control, Rome never returned to the unified power it was in its prime. The deposition of Romulus Augustulus by Odoacer symbolized not only the collapse of central government but also the end of an era. The peoples of Europe, now without Roman rule, were forced to reorganize, ushering in a period of political fragmentation that would lead to the early Middle Ages. As the Western Roman Empire weakened internally, foreign invasions were the final blow that sealed its fate. Barbarian tribes such as the Visigoths, Vandals, and Huns began invading the Roman borders with unstoppable ferocity. Rome, which had been invincible in its glory days, found itself unable to withstand these constant attacks. One of the most impactful events was the invasion of Rome by the Visigoths in 410 AD, led by Alaric I. This was the first time in 800 years that the city of Rome was sacked. The Romans, shocked and devastated by the loss of their most sacred city, watched as the capital of the empire fell to the hordes of invaders. Meanwhile, the Vandals were heading to North Africa, looting Carthage, and the Huns, under Attila, threatened to destroy everything in their path. These attacks not only dismantled the empire's physical defenses but also shattered the morale of the Romans, who were already facing internal and economic tensions. The loss of borders, which had once been so solid, marked the beginning of the end for Rome. The fall of the Roman Empire not only left physical ruins but also had a profound impact on art and culture. For centuries, Rome had been the epicenter of artistic creation, monumental architecture, and philosophical thought. However, with the disintegration of the empire, much of that splendor faded, and Europe entered a period of cultural regression. The great Roman constructions, with their imposing temples, amphitheaters, and bridges, were abandoned or destroyed. The roads, one of the marvels of Roman engineering, were no longer maintained, and trade between provinces dropped dramatically. The artworks that once celebrated the glory of Rome became forgotten relics. Roman art, so refined and detailed, was replaced by simpler and less sophisticated styles. Sculptures and frescoes were displaced by more rudimentary representations, and much of Roman knowledge, including scientific and philosophical advancements, was lost or relegated to the background. The Dark Ages, as it is known, began to dominate Europe, although this darkness only lasted until the Renaissance centuries later, which brought about the recovery of many of these achievements. However, although the Western Roman Empire collapsed, its legacy did not disappear entirely. Rome had left an indelible mark on many cultures, and this influence endured through civilizations that, although not Roman, adopted and adapted many of its achievements. In the East, the Byzantine Empire, with its capital in Constantinople, continued to exist for centuries. Despite the fall of Rome, Byzantium kept many Roman institutions alive, from law to public administration. They even attempted to recover some of the ancient western provinces, such as Italy and North Africa, though with limited success. On the other hand, the Islamic world, which began to expand in the 7th century, preserved and expanded many of the advances of classical Rome. From science and philosophy to medicine and mathematics, Islamic scholars collected knowledge from the ancient Romans and took it further, laying the foundations for the European Renaissance. In a way, the fall of Rome did not mean the end of its culture, but a transformation. Instead of fading away, its legacy was integrated and evolved into new civilizations, which continued to shape the world for centuries. With the disappearance of the Roman Empire, Europe entered an era of drastic changes, marked by the fragmentation of power. What was once a centralized and structured empire crumbled into a series of small kingdoms and territories, each ruled by local leaders, warriors, and tribes. This new social order is known as feudalism. Barbarian kingdoms, such as the Visigoths, Ostrogoths, and Franks, began to establish their own systems of governance, often based on tribal alliances and control over land. Local nobles took control of vast territories and created private armies to protect their domains. In this chaos, new loyalties emerged, and power became so decentralized that each region operated almost independently. But despite the political instability, something fundamental began to develop: the feudal system, based on the relationship between vassals and lords, which would last for centuries. Despite the fall of the Roman Empire, its legacy remains alive in many of the structures that form our current society. From law to architecture, politics, and language, Rome left a profound mark that has endured throughout the centuries. Roman law, for example, continues to be the foundation of many legal systems worldwide. Concepts like equality before the law, private property, and contracts are all principles that Rome developed and that continue to be applied in our courts. Additionally, Roman architecture, with its majestic arches, bridges, and buildings, still influences the way we design and build our cities. In the political realm, the concept of the Roman Republic, with its system of senators and magistrates, served as inspiration for many modern democracies. Even Latin, the language of Rome, is still alive in Romance languages: Spanish, French, Italian, Portuguese, and Romanian. Although the Roman Empire fell over 1,000 years ago, its influence continues to shape our modern world, reminding us that even in its fall, there are lessons and legacies that endure. And so, with the fall of Rome, Europe entered a new era, marked by fragmentation, the struggle for power, and the birth of new social and political structures. However, the legacy of Rome remains alive, guiding modern societies in their struggle for justice, order, and civilization. The history of Rome, from its peak to its fall, is a testament to the fragility of empires but also to human resilience. The Romans left us much more than a city or an empire. They left us a cultural and political legacy that continues to influence the way we live and govern today. Now, we invite you to reflect. What do you think of the fall of Rome? How do you think history would have been different if the Roman Empire had never fallen? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. If this analysis of the fall of Rome surprised you, share this video with your friends and subscribe to keep exploring more fascinating stories that define the course of history.